Good afternoon. It's the 18th day of August in the Lord's year 2015. I'm J. Michael McCoy in the middle of an Iowa State Fair. Tom Coates on a Tuesday, and we welcome our special guest from the 5th District, Congressman Steve King. And Steve's got a very important bill. It's H.R. 3251. And basically, let me try to say it in English. There is something in Obamacare in which the doctor can elect to be compensated for what is being called the end-of-life counseling. And those of us in this room translate that into death panels. That this doctor is going to coerce the patient, no matter how well or not well they are, into signing away the end of their life so the insurance companies don't go into debt for trying to save a life. That's my words, not yours. Did I get that close?
Mac, I'd embrace all those words exactly and precisely. I don't think I've said it that well myself. I would take us back to when Sarah Palin coined the phrase death panels.
Yeah.
This is the language that enables the death panels, and the language we're talking about, and the bill that I've introduced is H.R. 3251, and the complex legal language is short, but it's this: to exclude coverage of advanced care planning services under the Medicare program. That's subject of it. And then you've just got simple little strikes through existing code to bring about this result, which is to take away the incentive for the healthcare providers to promote the death of the patients and be compensated for it.
Steve King again here, 5th District congressional seat. They combined the 4th and 5th? Is that what they did? And
redistricted the whole state, actually.
Okay.
And so they're balanced. They have to. Iowa has the best redistricting law in the nation, and they have to redistrict by the optimum balance in population, down county lines for congressional districts, and they can't consider the residents of any incumbents. Their districts must be compact, contiguous, logical.
So that's the way you got the 5th District.
Because I'm compact, contiguous, and logical.
That's what I was going to say.
Thank you.
Now, Tom knows, Tom and I are not only co-hosts together, but we're very good friends. I consider him one of my best friends. And he walked through this whole thing with my mother-in-law, with my wife's mother. And this is an example. Obamacare is an example of why we need H.R. 3251 passed. Because what my family went through was simply a case where, and I don't remember the number. Do you remember the 3-letter number that Larry Baker called it? No. There's a code that the insurance company gives to the hospital, and it's the number that they're willing to invest into this person to either get healthy or die, and beyond that, the hospital has to make up the difference. So that now they're in the red for this patient. And Obamacare, or Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to say, is just constantly not only taking away lives at one end of the spectrum, that God creates us in the womb to be born into this world, a child of two humans as well as a child of God, but now they want to take us out at the end of life because we're going to get too expensive.
You know, this value of life, it seems as well we watched our society, it's devolved. And when the president, when the president sat before the pastor at Saddleback Church on August 9th, 2008.
Greg Warren.
Yes.
Or not Greg. Rick Warren.
Pastor Rick Warren.
Yeah.
And Pastor Rick Warren said to him, when did your life begin? And then Senator, to be elected later on, President Obama said, that's above my pay grade. Now, just think of that. August 9th, 2008. January 20th, 2009, just a few months later, this man is our president. Same day, he signed an executive order that accelerated abortions in this country. Now, he got a pay raise, I understand. And so apparently it wasn't beyond his pay grade anymore, and he's been making life or death decisions all along, ever since that time. Yeah. And remember him also saying they didn't want to punish he didn't want his daughters to be punished with a baby.
Yeah.
So that's the value of innocent unborn human life to Barack Obama. Exterminate a significant amount of that and use the government resources to do it. On the other end, he has pushed, and he's also stood on the floor of the Illinois State Senate as a state senator and argued when it was the Born Alive bill that protected babies who escaped an abortionist and were born alive, protected them from being killed. He argued that a mother that wanted an abortion had a right to a dead baby. And so that's the earlier stages of life. And then, of course, with Obamacare, turned people's lives into an equation of age and money rather than the intrinsic value of human life. And I think that one of the things that I just like to frame out here, it's a quote I had in my office for a lot of years from Bob Casey Sr., the father of today's Senator Robert Casey of Pennsylvania. He was a Democrat governor from Pennsylvania, since passed away. But he said it this way: human life cannot be measured. It is the measure itself against which all other things are weighed. You cannot put the value of human life in an economic equation in Obamacare and think that you can have a moral society.
We've got, of course, Congressman Steve King in the studio with us today on this Tuesday with Tom Coates, and we're talking about H.R. 3251. And this is one of the things that we can do as your constituents to help support you get these kind of bills passed, these savings of life bills. Oh, and by the way, the other thing I want, before I get to that, this concept of a living will isn't a living will. You talk to your lawyers and make sure your lawyer's a Christian when you talk to them, because my mother-in-law had a living will and it said no code. All right, and because that's what she wanted. If nobody else was around and she was unconscious, she didn't want to be kept alive. Well, my mother-in-law would look at the doctor and say, no, I don't want to die. I want the surgery. I want to be fed. And he would go back and say, but you have a living will. And she said, well, forget that living will. I don't want to die. And yet her document with her signature stood greater than her voice to the doctor in person. And your bill will also help get rid of that, or at least correct it.
It will help modify it at least. And one thing we don't know is when we write a bill, however precisely we write it, how is it going to be faithfully executed? And with this becomes law, if we could slide this past Barack Obama and he'd sign it and it becomes law, that doesn't mean that they're going to faithfully execute this bill either. I mean, we have to have the right administration with the right set of values, and then they have to make the appointments to the right people that are accountable. And that's so this does help. It helps against the text of a living will overriding the voice of the patient. It helps with that. But I would say this: the most important thing we can do, let's elect a president who reflects our values, and elect a president whom God will use to restore the soul of America.
Now, you haven't backed anybody yet,
no.
Right? You have not endorsed, so we won't talk about that. But I know, Tom, you certainly have some unfavorites.
Well, we were talking before the show started about Lindsey Graham, and I'd love to get him on the show, and he's strong on the foreign issues, the Iran, and we can agree on that. And again, I said a very affable man, but I do not understand some of his domestic policies in regards to immigration. Barack Obama has opened the floodgates, and not only Mexicans but Central Americans are coming in with impunity, and they're being hidden, and we figure that's to pad eventually the voter rolls. They get their families up here, the kids are coming up, and then the families come up, and pretty soon, you know, we're the minorities, not them. But Lindsey Graham, you know, he's one of 10 U.S. senators that are Republicans to vote for the new Attorney General. And under your hearings that you guys had, you demonstrated that she was not going to be any different than Eric Holder. She's going to ignore the law where Barack Obama wants her to ignore it, enforce it where he wants her to enforce it, and that's her highest allegiance, is what Barack Obama wants. How do these guys justify themselves when they do the, and don't stand up to Barack Obama on the areas of immigration, and we could go through a litany of these things domestically that Lindsey Graham in particular is like a John McCain, more of a rhino.
Well, yes, and Tom, of course, Lindsey's not going to stand up to the president of immigration because he generally agrees with him on that policy, and that's what his votes would be and his public statements would say. And by the way, thinking of it, when John Boehner was asked, on what topic do you most agree with President Obama, his answer was immigration. So we have some big problems out there, and Lindsey Graham's approach to that makes it pretty difficult. I know I posed a challenge to him. I just said, you can have your position on immigration and for granting amnesty, and then we'd get into a long discussion on definition of amnesty. I can do that too. But I said, you can have your pieces on that, but here's what I want to ask. The granting amnesty destroys the rule of law, at least with regard to immigration, and rewards lawbreakers. So how do you then set about restoring the respect for the rule of law if you reward the people that break it? Answer that question, then maybe you've got a point. But unless you can answer that question, then I don't see how this country can be better off by simply eroding the rule of law and handing immigration policy over to anybody but an American citizen.
Well, we've seen the manifestation of Donald Trump. He was one of the ones that brought out the immigration policy, and people were outraged over it. But my contention is that Donald Trump is a manifestation of our base frustration with the leadership. Boehner, McConnell, they say we won't shut down the government. No matter how outrageous a Planned Parenthood issue is, they guarantee they will not shut it down. How do we communicate our frustrations with leadership? If we don't, that's why a lot of people, Mac is himself, kind of endorsed and embraced Donald Trump.
I haven't endorsed. I have not endorsed. That's a political word, and I have not endorsed. I just think it would be fun, just once, to let a guy like that try to do his hand at the presidency. Yeah. And I'm probably nuts for saying that.
I'm still curious about the embraced part, Mac.
Oh, okay. The endorse you had enough problem with. The embrace, yeah, okay.
What do you think about that thought, Steve?
I thought it was very perceptive. You saw me smiling when you were saying it, Tom, because here's where I would put it, is that Donald Trump has tapped into the vast reservoir of American political support of the fed up. They're fed up with being told what we can do, what we can't do.
Yep.
Our society is transformed from a free people that when we grew up, when we were young boys growing up, we'd cook up ideas, and then we'd check our moral compass. And our moral compass wasn't as accurate as it is today, but we'd just still check it. And then somebody would say, well, there's no law against it, and we would proceed. Today, young people don't say that. I don't know how many years it's been since I've heard somebody say, well, with this idea, there's no law against it, so we went ahead and did it. No, the younger generation, even the Mensa students, the Harvard graduates and the Yaleys, and they will say instead, well, there must be a rule against that because nobody else is doing it. I guess we can't. Think how that diminishes the robust nature of the American civilization and culture. And it's time after time after time, government reaching in to tell you, here's another thing that was just crushing. Now, I'm not a smoker. I will have a cigar on the lawnmower once in a while, though. I didn't wear my lawnmower.
You and I have bumped into each other at the cigar store before.
But here's what I remember. I was sitting at the racetrack, Shelby County Racetrack, back when Chet Culver was governor, and right after the 4th of July, I believe it was 4th of July races down there. We're dirt track racing family, where you were then. And they came on the loudspeaker and they said, if you have any smokes, put them out. There'll be no smoking in the grandstand. There'll be no smoking on the grounds, and there'll be no smoking in the pits. This is public property, and nobody's allowed to smoke on public property.
July 1, 2000, yeah. And that's when the law went in.
This collective groan just went out from the grandstands, not because they were all smokers, but it was just a big chunk of freedom just gone because government had ruled. And so our construction...
Those lives seem to matter, Steve.
I guess.
The lives they think they potentially might endanger. I've been on beaches smoking a cigar and have somebody down the beach complain about me smoking a cigar. Well, the hypersensitivity of our population is rampant. And yet, when they're faced with something, so callous as the idea of Planned Parenthood, selling off and going after specific body parts, even with gruesome techniques to keep those body parts intact so they can sell them to the highest bidder, we don't even seem to want to stand up and do anything about that. If there's not a time like this, Steve, with those tapes coming out, that we can do something from a pro-life standpoint to try to save those lives, then I don't know what hope we've got.
Well, we can, we should. We started this this aggressive component of this effort in 2011. I brought the amendment that would cut off all funding to Obamacare. We had the political momentum to do that. And while that was going on, Mike Pence, now governor of Indiana, brought the amendment to cut off all funding to Planned Parenthood. He couldn't sustain that in the face of the political opposition then.
Just unbelievable.
We should be able to now.
All right, Congressman, thank you for coming. Thanks for taking some time. Now you know where we're at. You can stop by any time. Tom just hangs around the cigar shop around the corner, so he's always here to do his show. Frank, thanks for producing. Congressman Steve King, we'll be back just a minute here live on The Truth.
Thanks for having me on.